Hey everyone, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group at Coldwell Banker. Welcome to this week's episode of The Real Wausau Real Estate Show. Today we're talking about how to leave a property as a seller for the buyer at the time of closing, right? So if you look at the offer to purchase, in there it talks about how the buyer can walk through the home within 3 days of closing to verify that the home is in broom-swept condition, that the pieces or the what's included in the offer is still at the property, right? And just to verify that the home is in relatively the same condition as it was when the offer was written, other than normal wear and tear, right? So as a seller, what do you leave behind with the property? What do you have to do? What are you responsible for as far as how do you have to clean it? Do you have to clean it? What are the expectations? How do you make sure that you have a smooth closing process and a walkthrough process? Okay, so a lot of times sellers ask, what's the minimum that I have to do? Well, it's kind of the wrong question. Obviously, ideally, in an ideal circumstances, the buyer's happy in the process and the seller's happy in the process, right? And the seller is wants to really leave the property in fantastic condition. It doesn't always happen, right? Timelines, movers are there the day of closing or the day before closing. It's a lot of things are happening. It's stressful. And so it doesn't always work out, where you can leave a property in perfect condition, right? At a minimum, you have to leave it in broom-swept condition, which means, like it sounds, you have to sweep the floors. There shouldn't be dust and dirt and grime on the floors. You should vacuum the carpets, right? It just should be in fairly decent condition and fairly clean. Now, do you have to scrub every inch? No, right? But it should be in fairly decent and clean manner. As far as what's left in the property, a good thing as a seller to do is to refer back to the offer to purchase, see what appliances you have to leave. If there's any personal property that was negotiated as part of the deal, obviously you want to make sure that's there. And then any fixtures that are a part of the property you want to leave as well. This is something that sometimes comes up, is if something's screwed into the wall, like a TV mount, should that stay or should that go? Well, ideally, it's something that's probably best to talk to the buyer about prior to taking it or leaving it, right? Talk to the buyer, say, hey, do you want the TV mount or not? And see what they have to say. Technically, if it's screwed in, if it's affixed to the property, it should stay. It gets a little bit gray in certain areas. Another thing that commonly gets brought up is window treatments too, right? You have your curtain rods, which are screwed into the walls, but then you have the curtains, which you can quickly unthread and take, right? Well, again, ideally it's something that you have a conversation with. You don't want to have a lot of surprises when the buyers do their walkthrough. So those are things you can talk about, right? If you want to have a smooth walkthrough and closing as a seller, just imagine like, hey, how would I want to see this property if I was moving into it, right? You'd probably want, the cupboards fairly clean, like the stove fairly clean. Like it doesn't have to be perfect, right? As a buyer, they're probably going to do some deep cleaning when they move in, right? That's normal. But as a seller, if you can offload some of that responsibility by having it fairly clean, that's ideal, right? As far as what you can leave behind as a seller, you don't want to leave a bunch of junk and trash behind, right? That's the quickest way that a buyer can become concerned, is if you leave junk, right? Now, there are some things that you can leave behind or may be helpful to leave behind. For example, if there's matching flooring or matching carpet, or I guess maybe not matching carpet, but matching flooring like laminate, some tile, right? That's all helpful stuff. Maybe some shingles, siding. If there's materials that go with the home, you can certainly leave that behind. Now, as well as matching paint, this is one that gets abused a little bit too. So I've had it where people have probably 40 dried out paint cans and they leave all of them. Well, is it really beneficial to the buyer to have that? I mean, yes, maybe they have matching paint colors, but it may not be that beneficial if the buyer just has to dispose of all those different old paints that are not even being used anymore, right? So ideally, in an ideal world, it's a balance, right? The buyer shouldn't be going to the walkthrough looking to renegotiate at that time, and they certainly don't, most of them, right? And the sellers, ideally, you want to leave the property in a condition that you're proud with and the buyer's going to be happy with. So that's the ideal. If you have any questions or ideally, it's something that's talked through as part of the process too, but it doesn't always get get brought up. So hopefully you guys enjoy this week's episode of The Real and have a great walkthrough next time you buy a house.